Hey everyone, it's me Rai Rai, and today I'm going to talk about how I almost shit myself when I was backpacking through the UK. And as you know, I am going to be telling you stories while I am drawing in my sketchbook. My goal is to complete a sketchbook for the first time in my life. I've done dozens of sketchbooks in my life, but have never really finished them. I never completed every single spread. I always leave a couple spreads empty in the end, or hated something and kind of ripped it out. And okay, that's basically the goal. But yeah, so my story starts when I was in college. I was living in Berkeley at the time. It was the summer between my freshman year and my sophomore year in college. I was going to a really great art school and I was learning some new things about myself. I grew up in a very conservative school, home, and city, and I was kind of thrown into the San Francisco Bay Area, which was very liberal. And part of that was by choice because I was a closeted gay person. So I knew I wanted to be somewhere in a big city where I felt a little bit safer, living out kind of my truest life. Now, during my freshman school year, I had missed a lot of the friends I had in high school. One of the first friends I made in high school, we'll call him Roger. He was absolutely one of the kindest people I've ever met and one of the most generous people I ever met. And it was unbelievable that he invited me to go to the UK backpacking for a few weeks and all expenses paid, my plane flight, and also even spending money. His parents were very generous and extremely thankful to this day for that opportunity. You'll probably learn through these stories that I grew up poor only when I was really little, and then my family, I feel like, moved into like lower middle class. We always lived in apartments and condos, but I feel like progressively my parents were doing better and better, and we were. I never really felt poor, even in contrast to really wealthy friends. I always had a lot. You'll hear about my childhood, how full of wonderful, great things that I had, and I'm talking about just materialistically only, not just like a very loving parents, but also parents who just like had the means to kind of get me the toys I wanted and all those things when you're growing up as a kid and going to Disneyland and so I didn't live a poor lifestyle. I really did have a lot of kind of ideal a 90s kind of youth. If you look at 90s movies, it wasn't like a middle class family, but it was, we still enjoyed a lot of those things. It was just where we lived was a little bit smaller. It was always just an apartment or condo. And I always loved the condos and apartments we lived in. That meant that my friends just lived extra close. We shared a building, or they were only a door down, meant they were only like 20 feet away, which was really cool as a kid. So when my friend Roger told me about this trip, it was something I would have never thought about because I knew my parents would never be able to help me out with a trip like that. So from the grace of my friends and their parents, I found myself boarding a plane, and my friend Roger and I had both basically packed these 70-pound backpacks, with all kinds of crap, like to the point where we could not even close it. Like the night before, we were squeezing and kind of ramming everything in. We had all our clothes, extra socks. We knew we were going to have to do laundry there a couple times, but we crammed as much stuff as we possibly could. I took a little sketchbook. I took my MP3 player or Walkman or whatever at the time, and it was just so exciting. But the first thing that happened on our trip was packing those things so tight and then getting ready to go on the plane, like getting our boarding passes and getting ready to get our backpacks checked in, and they needed to look through them. so so we had to open up and take apart the backpacks completely and so they could inspect them. And then we had to repack them all in. I don't know how we did it because we had so much difficulty the night before, but we made it. The flight was really long. It was about a 12-hour flight. We flew from LAX to Germany, and then from Germany we took a smaller flight. Ryanair, I think, was kind of the Spirit Airlines at the time in Europe, where you could easily hop around and for really cheap. We took that into Dublin, Ireland, and then from there we kind of backpacked all around the UK. You know, Scotland and Ireland and Northern Ireland and England, and lots of great adventures. Many stories I could tell you, but the one story that sticks out to me the most, because it was just so humbling, was the time I almost shit myself. Now, I'm going to be very transparent. I have shit myself before when I was really sick, especially when I was younger. I think I had a really bad fever, and I was like, am I going to throw up or am I going to crap myself? And I ended up throwing up in the toilet while crapping myself. And I feel like many people have probably been in that situation. So this was nothing kind of new to me, but at the same time, it was happening when I was with a really good friend, and I was, in my early 20s, and I was in a foreign land to me. I didn't know anything about the culture as much as I just saw on TV. YouTube wasn't even around then, so I had never seen kind of what small villages were like in the UK. So throughout our trip, one of our favorite foods to eat was fish and chips. And it's just the most readily available thing that I knew I liked whenever we go to a small village. And we weren't always in small villages, but we did make a point to go around the whole, like all the islands, kind of like an circle our way around. So we did end up going into smaller towns. I'm not going to say really what country it was. My memory might not be that well anyways. It could have been Ireland or Scotland, who knows. But we were in a small little beach villages, or not beach villages, I should say, oceanfront villages, and eating lots of fish and chips wherever we went. I don't know how it is now, but in the early 2000s, when you ordered fish and chips from a small little fish and chips place in a small little town or village, you would go up to the stand or little storefront and you would order your fish and chips, and they would give you, I feel like, almost 2 giant potatoes worth, if not more, a serving of chips, just like the fried potato wedges, and then a giant kind of fillet deep fried of fish that was probably just caught moments ago or just in that morning or whatever. And it was always so delicious. The fish was so flaky, the oil was hot. They didn't season it at all, which, a lot of complaints come from, like stereotypical complaints come from the UK, or from the US about the UK, that like the food isn't flavored much. But it was delicate, like the fish, like you almost didn't need it flavored because you were tasting just the beautiful fresh fish that had just been cooked, and it was so flaky and juicy and everything was delicious. After a while though, I would say as an American, just from my upbringing of probably really oversalted processed foods, I started to crave salt a lot on my fish and chips. The potatoes, I wanted more salt, and so I'd put vinegar on. I loved the way the vinegar tasted. It was delicious on the fish and on the potatoes, but I was also craving ketchup so much. Now, people who are in the UK aren't dying when they hear this, but at the time, the only place we were able to get ketchup, like Heinz ketchup, the ketchup that we know in the US, which is probably just completely loaded with sugar, was like if we went to the Burger King or McDonald's. Before you start groaning and being like, you ate at McDonald's or Burger King or whatever while you're in the UK, there were some moments where we needed to get something fast, and that was when we were in big cities like Edinburgh. We stopped at a McDonald's, and it was a crazy experience biting into like a McDonald's cheeseburger while looking out the window and looking at this incredible castle on the hill in Edinburgh. So but we ate a little bit of fast food there. Also, part of it was just experience. We wanted to see um, what American fast food places were like there, and a lot of the things were better. I think like extra things were kind of on the menu, which was kind of interesting. But anyway, so ketchup, we would like hoard the ketchup from those places because we were like, when we go to a fish and chips place, they didn't really have ketchup. A lot of in the small villages, they had the ones that did say they had ketchup. It was much more of a watery, more vinegary kind of take on ketchup. So it was just might as well just put malt vinegar on it. It didn't have the sweetness that I was used to growing up. So um, yeah, so there's tiny little culture shocks going there, but I'm going to talk more about this later. How there is much more of a culture shock when I came back to the U.S. It was also cool when we went to a village and we saw something kind of classic we had heard about where they would wrap your food in newspaper, actually, like yesterday's newspaper. They would wrap up your fish and chips in there and just send it with you. Like just tie it with a string or tape it real quick, and then you're off on your way. And we're sitting on a curb eating this incredible fish and chips, minus the ketchup or the salt. But as I mean, I think at one point I just stopped eating potatoes because I was so full of potatoes, like, or done with potatoes. But the fish never got old. So while we were in one village, I ended up eating some fish and chips that day. Water, I was always a little curious about. I used some in some of the towns or smaller villages around the coastline. The water tasted different, and I was never worried about it. Like, I've gotten sick in Mexico from, the water or other places, but I don't know. I don't want to blame the water, but some of the water tasted different. So I didn't know if it was the food or the water. But shortly after a meal, when we're in a small town, I started to I started to feel that rumble. And I think you might have been there before where you feel that rumble in your tummy and you're immediately your whole body like shudders because you're like, I know what this is going to mean probably in an hour or a half hour if I'm lucky. Like, hopefully it doesn't just come on unannounced like in a minute or two because I am nowhere near a public restroom as far as I know. So I felt the rumble, and we're walking through kind of these little, I guess they're little main street at the time. And I thought there's got to be a pub with a toilet here, probably. But we couldn't see anything. Like, I don't remember if things were closed or it was mostly like shops that didn't have restrooms. So I told my friend Roger, I was like, I have to go to the restroom soon. And he was like, okay, well, let's look. And we kind of looked at our little TripAdvisor map or something we had, or I think we had like a town map. Oh, we did have a town map. So we opened it up and we're like, oh, the hostels usually gave out like a town map. Let's cut through this because the main street kind of like curved a little. So we're like, oh, we could cut through this little housing area to, kind of get a little shortcut to the pub that's over here. And they'll totally have a restroom. Pubs are just basically these public houses where you drink and eat and shit if you have to and pee. So I was like, okay, let's go. So we started walking through this little neighborhood, and I started feeling the rumble even more. And I was like, I have to go soon. So I start walking faster. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start going really fast and I'll catch up to you. Or you could just catch up to me. So I start just like walking as fast as I can. And from what I remember, we don't have our backpacks. We left them in a locker in a hostel. So we were, I was able to walk really fast slash jog. So I'm jogging through this neighborhood, trying to make my way to the pub. And I'm like, oh my God, it is here. It is gonna, like, code brown, right? It's gonna come out now. So I'm looking for a bush and I'm like, this is gonna happen. I'm literally gonna poop in a bush. Not even poop, probably pee out of my butt in a bush when anyone could just walk out and see me, and I'm in some foreign country and I'm gonna get arrested probably, and they're gonna throw me in jail for indecent exposure for pooping in the a bush. And I'm just like, oh my God, no, this can't be happening. So I'm walking looking for a bush, and like it was like the fog had parted and I saw, like, it felt like I found Nirvana because I saw a sign on a house that made it look like a business. You know, like kind of in some neighborhoods across the US, you can see this a lot. In kind of older neighborhoods, you'll see where they converted houses into like law offices or dentist offices or something. That's how this was. And I looked and I was like, I just saw a business. Couldn't even read what it was because I was so like delirious about poop about to run down my leg. So I just run up. All I know is this is not a house. This looks like a business. I start knocking on this house door, which is a business, I'm assuming. And this person opens and is like, oh, hell, hi, welcome. And then I was like, hey, do you have a restroom? And they're like, right away, I could read on their face, they're about to say no. And I'm like, I really have to go. It's an emergency. I'm so sorry. I don't think I can make it to the pub down there. This is so embarrassing. I'm so sorry. This woman was so nice. I was like, oh, sure, come on in. And I'm like trying not to like push her aside and find the restroom on my own. I'm like quietly following her. And then while I'm following her, I realize like there's a lot of kids around. I'm like, why is there so many kids in here? And I realize it looks like some kind of daycare or something. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense. It's a daycare. So she shows me to the restroom and says like, oh yeah, here you go. Just please don't take long. You know, we have people that are going to need to use it and stuff. I'm assuming the kids. So I hurry up and close the door, and it's a big restroom. Like, I was like, wow, this is great. I was like, I made it. So I button my pants as fast as I possibly could. I sit on the toilet and I'm like, I won. I totally won. And I just let it rip. And I felt amazing. I was like, I did it. I can't believe I did it. So while I'm in there, I was like, okay, crap. I need to kind of hurry this though, because she seemed concerned at first, and I know I can't sit on the toilet all day, which is probably what I needed to do that day because my stomach was ripped up. So I was going and going, and then all of a sudden I was like, I should probably flush because it's getting a little crazy in this restroom, the smell or whatever was happening. So in the UK, if you're not familiar with this, in the US, probably not, but in the UK, at least in some of the areas we were, the certain things were different. I don't know if there's some kind of law or something, but light switches were usually on the outside of the restroom. It was just some safety thing they had. So there was no outlets or anything or light switches inside the restroom. I got that. But also, some of the toilets didn't have a flush button or flush like lever. What they had a lot of the times was this, like, I guess you'd pull down on a rope. This little rope would kind of dangle near your head, kind of almost like a little bit beside you. So you didn't have to reach around to flush the toilet. You literally could just like lift up your hand like a foot if you're sitting down the toilet and pull down on a little handle that's hanging on a chain or a rope, and that would flush the toilet. It's really cool. And it felt super old school, or I don't know. I thought it was always fun. So I'm looking for the handle. I kind of see it with my peripheral vision, and I pull it. And as soon as I yank on this rope, this piercing alarm goes off. And I'm like, what? And I look at my hand that's holding on to a handle that's bright red. And then I look up a little more and I see it is connected to a red rope. Now, beside that red handle, a little bit further forward, is a rope that is not bright red. And I put this all together later that must have been some kind of thing for maybe a kid or somebody who maybe has struggles with the restroom that needs help. That was some kind of alarm to get people to come forward. So the alarm goes off. And immediately I hear somebody pounding on the door, and it's the woman, and she is no longer nice. She is just like, get out of there. What are you doing in there? Like, are you doing drugs? Blah, blah, get out. And I'm just like, still mid pooping probably because my stomach was so upset. And I just frantically start wiping and frantically start getting myself together and actually flushing this time, not pulling the alarm. And I open the door and I quickly run out, and she runs into the restroom to inspect whatever I was doing, which I was just pooping. And then I run out of the business. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I set an alarm off. And then all the kids are kind of like wondering what's going on because maybe the kids know to never pull that, or maybe a kid has never pulled that. But I ended up running out, and it was, even though I didn't know these people at all, I just felt still so embarrassed. I don't know if I've ever been that embarrassed before in that moment when I opened the door and saw the terror in her face as probably all this smell wafted out. And she probably thought I was doing something like really inappropriate, like drugs in the restroom or something. But yeah, so that was the time I almost crapped myself in the UK, and I'll never forget it. If you live somewhere where you have a garage, you know how there's that red handle that kind of dangles from the garage as it opens and closes. That red handle that kind of releases the garage door, that just, every time I see it, it just reminds me of that moment when I pulled the red string or handle in the UK. Now, not all my experiences were that exciting in the UK. A lot of them were just very chill. And one of my favorite parts of the UK when we were Roger and I were walking around in these clover fields in Ireland and walking along the cliff sides that fell, I don't know, hundreds of feet down into the water. It was some of the most breathtaking views I'd ever seen. And even to this day, it makes me emotional when I think about those cliffs and just how beautiful and scenic everything was. Another thing I liked a lot was when we were in Cork, Ireland. We stayed with a friend of a friend, and they took us down to the little pub, and it was great to see all kinds of different uh, financial walks of life all going to the same pub at night. So whether you're filling in gas or somebody who did worked at a gas station, or if you're somebody who busses tables, or if you're a businessman or woman, you're a doctor or whatever, you would all end up kind of in your same neighborhood pub at the end of the night and just hang out. And everything seems so much slower paced when I was in Cork. And I just remember how it felt like the Shire, like Lord of the Rings were kind of a new thing back then. And I just remember it felt like, I was like, wow, is this what life can be like? I feel like everything in the US was so fast paced. So when I came back to the United States, I felt culture shock. I had heard people say, like, oh, when you go to the UK, you're probably going to feel culture shock. You're going to get homesick. But when I came back to the United States, that's when I felt culture shock. That's when I was like, everything's moving at a mile a minute in the cities where I live, and everyone's just struggling to get by, and everyone's so divided in so many ways. And I was like, wow, is this the way things are supposed to be? So yeah, I think that gift of traveling was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And if you're a young person listening to this, I really encourage you to travel. I don't think that um, I don't think it comes across for me as that like Ireland was doing something better than we're doing in the United States, because I feel like there are places in the United States that are like that, where communities all come together. I remember the first experiences my mom had on BART. She said, wow, it's so nice how not everyone's just cooped up in their cars. At the time, BART was a lot safer. But we were in BART, and it's just, you see business people and executives, and you see school kids on there, and teenagers and elderly people, and people from all walks of life were on BART, and we all worked together on BART in a way. We all were cordial in a way at one time. And I remember I was like, oh, that's so true. It is nice versus my experience growing up in Southern California, where you're more in your car and you don't have as much interactions with strangers. In BART, you give your common courtesy. You stand up when a pregnant woman comes in, or somebody who's older than you that might need a seat. I've even just stood up for people that were young that looked like they just got off a long shift at Best Buy or something. So yeah, there's this great camaraderie that comes with having to be part of a community. And experience each other. Anyways, that's me on my my little pulpit for a moment. But anyways, it was a fun experience in the UK. If you have any fun travel stories, I would love to share them if you would allow me to. I know on this series I do want to share a lot of stories. It's kind of becoming, I feel like, a draw with me series. I heard that mukbang started not from just gorging yourself on a bunch of food, but it came from the necessity of people not wanting to feel like they're eating alone. So they would put on a video of somebody eating, and you would eat while kind of watching somebody eat, or in your peripheral vision at least. So if you're in your studio drawing and you ever want company, I hope you could play my playlist. I hope you could share it, comment, like, subscribe, whatever you can to help me out. I am a new YouTuber. I got 10,000 subscribers in the first few months, which I was really excited about. But I did, when just reading and researching about YouTube, I was like, I heard that it's great. People like to see people learn things. And I feel like I don't want to say I have nothing to learn in art, but sketchbooking is one of the biggest weaknesses I feel like I have. So I was like, well, let me learn with you all. Also, if you're in the UK watching this, have you ever seen two handles like that hanging from the ceiling? Like one for flushing and one for an alarm? Because was it really an alarm for like kids, or was it for something else? Like, I doubt it would be a fire alarm. But yeah, I'm always was curious about that. Like, why did they put the handles so close to each other? And especially for like if kids were going to use it, or was it was it the adult restroom that I used, or was it maybe they had like high need students maybe, or adults maybe at one point that would need an alarm like that. But anyways, I feel like I did see something similar to like that in the United States. Of course, we just have the regular flushing toilets handles, or I shouldn't say regular, but that's, you know, the standard kind of ones you see in the US, where you just flip the lever instead of pull a string or a handle. But at, you know, certain hospitals or hospices, you'll see like little alarm buttons, and sometimes little handles that you could pull for to set off an alarm. But yeah, if anyone, I was just really curious. I've always wondered what the heck I did to myself there that night. One thing I really liked about the UK too was seeing their views on American culture in the early 2000s. When I was on this trip, a lot of times when you go back to the hostel at night, there's not much to do except to crowd around. At the time, we were crowding around these tiny little TVs and watching TVs. And I remember they were doing a Friends marathon, you know, the TV show Friends. And they were doing a marathon of like the UK's favorite episodes. And every single episode was a Thanksgiving episode, of all things. I was like, Thanksgiving, that's like, I don't know if it was their favorite because it was just so, you know, a holiday that they don't celebrate there, and or just because they're the funniest ones happen to be Thanksgiving episodes. I think I've watched almost every single Friends episode. I started watching them all through, doing like a marathon by myself, and I think I don't know. I think I got just a couple seasons in. Most of them I'd already seen when they were syndicated for years, but yeah. So I was curious about that. If you're from the UK, do you have extra fascination with Thanksgiving because it's a holiday that is not celebrated there? Or I was wondering if it just was a coincidence that every single episode for Friends was a Thanksgiving episode. I'm just about done with this drawing. Just putting in some finishing details. I'm working in the book is a moleskin book. It's a watercolor book. It's not 100% cotton, but I'll probably still watercolor in it one day. I just figured to start this project, I wanted to do something simple, black and white line work. I'm painting a lot of succulents. I usually will work from a reference. I literally just Google search succulents, and then I have right now in front of me, like, I don't know, it's like 2 dozen images of succulents pop up when I Google search it, and then I just take inspiration. So I'm not really copying exactly anything I'm seeing. I just kind of get the gist of what a succulent looks like, and then just kind of go for it. And it's more, as you can see, I'm not rendering it in any way. It's just more of a pattern, and that helps me get a spread filled out kind of fast and in a fun way. But it also, I don't know, if it helps me develop the shorthand style of getting things down really quick, which is what I want my sketchbook to be. I want to be able to throw down a spread like this in like 30 minutes. Thanks for watching and drawing with me and listening. If you have any ideas of what kind of subject matter I should draw, please let me know too. I'm probably going to be filling botanicals though. So if you have any botanicals that you think would work well in the sketchbook, please let me know. Thanks again, and I'll come up with a story to tell you next time. Bye, guys.